Howdy, howdy, and welcome back to Gale FFTCG. I am Serah, your host, and today we will be looking at Mono Wind Storm. So, I piloted this deck at my locals quite recently, in fact, last night at the time of this recording, and I gotta say, I think I've found a new favorite deck so far. It is an exciting list, it is a fun list, and it also makes you feel like a 3000 IQ gamer. So, there we go. So, the purpose of the deck, like most Storm decks before it, is just cast as much as possible. Um, the only difference being that the payoff is a little bit different. Since Mono Wind, we're not running Lock like we normally would. And on top of that, we are also just kind of building up a board state that we can win from just by the value and the amount of cards it draws and things like that. So, without further ado, let's just jump into the most important cards of the list. Since we are in Wind, we have some of the most reliable backup searches in the entire game. Old versions of this list were running 2 Chocobo Sam and 3 Norstalin, or 3 Chocobo Sam and 2 Norstalin, depending on how you wanted to play it. Now we're running 3 and 3 because we had a lot of slots to fill. And basically, if you draw into any one of these, you will probably have at least 2 backups by the end of turn 2, if not 3. So that is very, very good. We are running 1 Fat Chocobo because Chocobo Sam can search it, and if it gets played on the field, Chocolate immediately gets played on the field next turn. So by turn 2, we'll have the 3 backups. We have 1 Fiona for searching. We have a copy of Althea because looping and bouncing and activating stuff is really good. 1 Stiltskin, which is vitally important for our deck, simply because Lusso and Ochu are both the best cards in the deck. They are some of the stuff that makes it go, and it searches both of them. If you have any of these at any point during the game, you will probably be able to storm off pretty confidently. If you have these even earlier, the earlier you'll be able to storm. And we have 1 copy of Sid Polendina, which searches for Rosa and Edge, both of which are very important to the deck, because Rosa allows us to activate all of our things on cast 3, or all of our backups, sorry. And at cast 5, which this deck can get to very easily now, it will try and check the top card. If it's a character that isn't on our field, then it will be put into play, which is very, very good. For our monsters, we have 3 Typhon because early removal is really vital, especially against aggressive decks. This deck needs its time to set up. Not too long, maybe a couple of turns, but even so, the game is very fast nowadays, and it's more helpful if we kind of just balance that. We are running 3 Atomos because we don't have any searchers, because we're not in ice. 3 Atomos is essential. On the second cast, we'll activate 2 things, and it becomes a monster at damage 3, or we can activate it to become a monster at damage 3. And when it attacks, we activate everything. This is really important for getting off these storm turns again. 3, so we can draw into it as soon as we want. Any extras are just discarded, but 3 is an absolutely fine number. Ochu is a multiplay card, so we don't care that it's at 3. It's great. When it enters the field, it activates 2, and it also becomes a forward at damage 3, but that's just a passive. As soon as it hits damage 3, it just stays as a forward, so it can be removed, but that's fine because we have cards to get it back. We're running 2 copies of Alexander, a card that lets you draw a card when you hit it in damage as an EX burst, or when you cast it for 1. That's fine. Storm isn't so much about what you cast, it's about being able to cast multiple things in a row. Any card that's 1 CP and draw a card is phenomenally good. It is, in fact, wildly good. We have the other cool part of this card is 1 CP to draw 2 after cast 4 is better. It was originally at 3. However, I've swapped it for Ashura. Ashura is insane. It's 1 CP, activate up to 5 backups, choose 2 forwards you control, activate them, or, the most important part, is choose a character of cost 2 or less and add it back into your hand. So that can be a forward or a backup, or a monster, which is most of the cards in this deck are actually 2 or less, so that's great. Chocobo also is a summon that we can search off with Chocobo Sam. It bounces a card to our hand and lets us draw another card, which is really good with the next card and the first of our forwards. Bismarck, 5 CP, 9k, that whenever a card is bounced back to hand, you can draw a card. This happens once per turn. So if you have this with Chocobo, Chocobo bounces something and draws a card, and then on top of that, the Bismarck will trigger and draw a card, which is very strong. So returning basically 3 things to hand is really broken. Or being able to draw 3 cards from bouncing something into your hand is very strong. At the end of turn, you can bounce 1 wind character back into your hand. This is really good for starting up storm loops again. And last, but certainly not least, a very good removal option is we can dull a wind character, choose a character our opponent controls, well, any forward, if that matters at any point. And basically, we can ping them down and deal 2k for each one that we dull. So if there's 4 things on our field, including Bismarck, we can dull down 4 and do 8k to something straight away at our opponent's end step or something like that, and we're basically off to the races. It's very strong. And following on from that, because it's very important in the deck, we have 2 Lulu. Earlier variants of the list were only running 1, but I realized it's just that strong with getting back Chocobos, Alexanders, and Asuras over and over and over that it's definitely worth keeping in the list. I've talked about Rosa already, but I'll talk about her a little bit more because she is just that strong. The thing I found in most of my games with this card is obviously it's very good because it activates a bunch of stuff, but 1 wind also gives it protection from abilities, which is very, very strong. Your opponent always has to respect it. If you have 1 backup open, even on your opponent's turn, they have to respect that the Rosa will likely stay on the field, which is very good. We're running 2 copies of Y'shtola just to protect ourselves from summons, and it helps stop some more damage-based decks, fire, and things like that. Up next, we have 3 Pinello, which is probably the strongest card in the deck, or at least one of them. One of the 2 strongest cards in the deck. 2 CP, at the end of every turn, you deal 1k to the board for each thing you've cast this turn, the aim being 7 or 8, to kill most of the best boards in the game. The cool part about this card is that you could play this at any part in the storm chain, and it only waits to end of turn to do that. So say you want to get an Atomos off early, but it doesn't make any sense for you to play, like, say, an Ochu for less value. You can just play Pinello first, and then play Ochu and activate 4 things, and that's really cool, off of the Atomos. Or you could cast a bunch of stuff, and then hold off to the very end, and then go after your opponent's maybe tried to interact or whatever, and then you play Pinello, and it just counts however many cards have been cast, including Pinello, which is kind of cool. So this can fit in at any point that you want to storm off. It's a really good card for that, and it's an easier board wipe than Barrel Eye. So I think it's just a great card in general, and I will be probably ranting and raving about this on my channel for a while to come anyway. 2 copies is a Dane. This can steal cards out of our opponent's deck. There's some fun interactions with newer cards, including the Light Maria. I was in a game and managed to steal the Light Maria and then could activate a backup and had extra storm count and stuff like that. That was very cool. We had a few other games where there were just little things that it could take that were just really strong. So anything that adds to our cast is just awesome. We have 1 copy of Edge, which I've talked about a little bit, but he's very good against Glaciella with Zet lists. Keep this card and prioritize this card if you're in any fire-based matchups for obvious reasons. But do be wary, there is a new 4 CP Bahamut that's running around that can shoot 2 things for up to 10k, or at damage 5 it's like 2 things up to 15k spread across, basically. Be careful of that, because Edge can only choose things that are targeting can only redirect things to him that are targeting 1 person specifically. Be very careful of that, but otherwise this card is great, especially against, like, single target removal. We're running 2 copies of Ash because drawing cards is always infinitely better than not. And on average, every turn we're going to be casting 3 things, minimum, to draw us into our pieces. So Ash is good, and it's really great for just being protected at all times if you have more than 6 characters, which you pretty much always will. Very good. And the last card is Lusso. So for those of you who do not know what Lusso does, he is a new card. He's 1 CP if you have cast him at 3 or more. You will draw a card, which is super strong. It's a great third cast. Also, if you cast him as the 7 card or later in the turn, you get to deal 8k to your opponent's entire board, which is pretty strong. But honestly, this card is so strong just at cast 3 that oftentimes you find you don't need to aim for that cast 7. It's really strong when it goes off, and you feel like an absolute god tier gamer when you do, but it's better actually to just use this as your third cast. You're drawing cards, you're extending your turn, and if you have ways of bouncing it back and things with like Chocobo or whatever, then you'll probably be able to get to 7 at some point. But yeah, that's the absolute end of the deck list. If you like what you see, do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because it helps me out and just shows a little bit of love, you know? So, yeah, thank you very much. I hope you have a great day and a great rest of your week.